Well, tonight's goal is to get the parts we got from CV Performance and get them installed in our CV carburetor. So here's what we got. Another sticker. Tool chest is already kind of covered. Let's see. AMSOIL catalog, don't need it. CV Performance catalog, nice. Paperwork, here we go. Finally got down to the good stuff. Main reason we're doing this is right here. I got the idle and the main jets, 42 and a 185. That's what Scott at Hillside thinks we need for this build. If you remember on an earlier video, I talked about how I dropped this thing at one point and bent my Easy Just mixture screw. Well, I got a fresh, brand new Easy Just mixture screw. And then this is what they call the packing kit. This is the stuff that goes behind that mixture screw. Figured we may as well get that going as well. When I took this thing out of the bike originally, it was just nasty. So you remember we dunked it in Pine Sol for a couple of days. Got it all nice and cleaned up. So I'm going to show you how to take this thing apart, give it a once over. I'm not going to do a full rebuild, but I'm going to go ahead and mostly take it apart enough where this will show you how you could do one if you wanted to do a quick rebuild on this. Honestly, I don't know if what I'm about to show you is the right way or the best way, but it's my way and it works, so take it for what it's worth. First thing I do, you'll notice here on the top there's 4 screws that hold this top piece on. And this one here does double duty. It also holds this bracket on. So we're going to take that one off first so we can get the bracket off. Now I got to confess, I cheated a little bit. I actually took this thing apart when I was cleaning it out. So this thing has all been freshly apart. If you're dealing with a carburetor that has been on a bike for a long time, it might come apart harder than this. The screws kind of tend to get frozen, but these are all freed up. So anyway, this is that little bracket. There's a little, you can see there's a little point on there that it kind of hooks on. That's that. So now we're left, we got 3 screws left holding on the top. Now there is a spring under here. So when you start getting this thing loose, pay attention. The spring's not real powerful, but do pay attention and take it apart under control. There we go. That's the cap. That's obviously the spring. Now this is something that you're going to want to check as part of your process. This is what's called the slide, and there's internal parts here. There's a little plastic catch. I don't know what they call that thing. And then down inside, this is the needle. And so some of the things you're going to want to look for when you're doing this is these needles can tend to get erosion on the tip, overuse. So take a good look at that. If your needle's not perfectly smooth and in good shape, they're not expensive, get it replaced. The big one you want to look at is this rubber boot on the top of the slide. You can find a video that talks about how CV carburetors work, but the important point to remember is that there's like 2 air chambers moving this slide up and down. This thing moves up and down through air pressure. And if there's a hole, if this rubber piece here has deteriorated, you've got holes or pinholes or anything like that, you're going to lose performance. So give that a good inspection and make sure that's in good shape. Now I'm going to take off the bottom part. This is basically the float bowl. Stock, I think these are Phillips head screws. I replaced these with these socket head screws, I don't know, however many years ago. They make it easier. These can be just tighter than hell when you're first doing this. So if you've got an old carb that hasn't been serviced in some time and it still has the Phillips head screws, you're really going to have to push down on it and get after it to get those things loose. They really tend to jam up. All right, so 4 screws are removed. Now, this float bowl comes off as an assembly, and there's some stuff going on. Pay attention right here. That's actually the shaft that operates the accelerator pump down inside. So you're going to see that wiggling around there. There's the float bowl. This little piece here is just a kind of an accordion seal that just kind of pops on there. So don't worry too much about that. Now here's what you're going to want to do. There's a rubber gasket around the edge of the bowl. This was only replaced a year ago, so I'm not bothering replacing it again. But if you are refreshing an old carb that needs a full service, that's something you're going to want to do. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show you how the accelerator pump operates. There's 3 screws to get it open. And again, this thing is spring loaded, so do pay a little attention when you're taking it apart. All right, here we go. Things you want to pay attention to on this. And again, this has all been recently serviced, so I'm not actually doing it, but you'll notice there's a little O-ring right there. So if you're doing a rebuild, you're going to want to get a fresh O-ring. The spring itself will last forever, you don't worry about that. Then this is the accelerator pump itself, and again, it's just a little rubber piece. Same thing, if this is old, dried out, worn, stiff, whatever, cracking, get a fresh one, they're not expensive. So that's it. So that shaft that we saw on the carburetor body, it pokes through this hole here, points down in here, and basically pushes against this rubber piece, like so. That's what drives the accelerator pump action. So that's how the accelerator pump works. I'm just going to put it back together because this one is fine. Done. All right, so other than the accelerator pump and this gasket, when you're servicing this, you're cleaning out your float bowl, just look for, varnish and gunk in here, make sure that gets all cleaned out really well. And, you'll notice there's various pieces and channels in all of this. Get yourself a can of carb and choke cleaner, spray it all out, clean it all up real good. But for now, for our purposes, that's all set. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to take this. This is the float. That's what sets the fuel level in the bowl. So we want to get that out. And what I like to use is just get a little tiny Allen wrench, a little hair fine one. And then this piece will only push out. There's a little pin that holds this in. See right there? It'll only go out one way. So if you're pushing on it and it doesn't want to go, you're probably just going in it from the wrong side. So it should not go hard. So this little pin should just basically pop out. But that's what will release the float. Now this is a 90, so it has kind of an older style float. If the newer ones, if yours is like solid black plastic, that's just the newer style, but it's all the same thing. And then one of the important pieces down in here is that guy right there. That's called the needle. And there's 2 things about this. First of all, if your carb is old and you don't know how old your needle is, just go ahead and get a new one. Again, these aren't expensive. The other thing, if you don't want to replace it, just get in there with something. There's a little plunger on the top here. Make sure that's free and operates smooth. That's important. Next thing you can do, just a good tip, down in here there's a little hole where the needle basically sticks in there, and that's what stops the flow of gas coming in. So that's where the needle valve is operating. So just take yourself a clean Q-tip. You can put a little carb cleaner on it, whatever. Just spin it in there a little bit. Make sure that brass fitting is perfectly clean, good shape. That'll help make sure your carb doesn't leak. Next thing I want to show you is right here. This is where my bent Easy Just screw went. This is called the pilot adjustment screw or the idle adjustment screw. That's part of what sets the mixture on these things. If you notice on yours, if you have, instead of like a screw visible here, there's just like a little aluminum plug, that means your carburetor's never been opened up and serviced. If you run into that, just go to the CV Performance website. There's instructions on what to do. Basically, you put a drill in there and you pull that plug out, and that will give you access to a tiny little screw that's down inside of there. This Easy Just screw replaces that tiny little screw just to make it easier, because this way you've got a little something you can work with instead of trying to get a screwdriver in there. But anyway, when you take that out, you're going to have your screw. There's going to be a spring and then a washer, which is microscopic. And then there is a little tiny rubber gasket down in there that's the same size as that tiny little washer. And if you have trouble getting it out, just take a real fine pick and you should be able to fish it out. Okay, so now we're finally getting down to business here. Here's our jets. Got this is the main jet. And way down in this hole here is the pilot jet. So we're going to get these out. I'm going to grab a wrench. Okay, 5/16 wrench, and we're just going to break loose. On this part here, there's actually two pieces here. This thing's the emulsion tube, and then the jet actually screws into the emulsion tube. Now, these can tend to be really tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just half thread it back in there and hold it with a wrench. Break it loose that way. So there's our emulsion tube, and that's the jet we're replacing. And my eyes are so bad I can't even read what this one is. But set it aside. It's fine. So if you're doing a service, go ahead and clean these out. I've already cleaned most of this stuff. But clean out your emulsion tube. Now, the pilot jet, I never had a screwdriver. There's like a real narrow hole to get to, so I actually ground down the screwdriver to get it to fit. Just kind of feel it in there until it grabs. Be careful, because these are pretty soft. They're just brass. So make sure you're in the slot, and then give it good downward pressure as you loosen it. Because again, these things can just get tighter than hell, and you do not want to strip the head off of that jet down inside the hole. I'm not even sure how you'd solve that problem. Anyway, so that's what the pilot jet looks like. So what we're going to do, pretty much set, we're going to start putting in the new stuff. Here's our jets. CV Performance. I am not paid by those guys. They seem like they do a good job. I've bought quite a few things from them over the years. So why not? I think it's largely all US made, which I like. Okay, so here's our pilot. Again, the specs that I got off of this, I actually got from Scott at Hillside. He said start out with a 42. So there's our 42. It's nice and clean. I can actually read that one. There we go. So I'm just going to drop it down in the hole and then take my ground down screwdriver and snug it up. You don't have to get after these real hard. Just give it a good, a good snug. In fact, don't over tighten them. I'm going to go ahead and put the emulsion tube back in. Tighten it down first. And again, we're not, showing off our strength on these deals. All right, where'd my other jet go? Here we go. So here's our new 185 main jet, which goes in the end of the emulsion tube. grief. Got dust on my screwdriver. There we go. All right, so again, just, you know, just a good snug. There, that's good enough. All right, new jets are installed. Now, I'm going to go ahead and here's my mixture packing kit and my new not bent easy just mixing screw. It even comes with a nice little vinyl sleeve to protect it during shipping. There we go. Sharp as can be. All right, so now this is a little delicate just because these pieces are so small. Here's the order you want to do this. Okay, I don't know if we can see this or not. Spring, washer, gasket. And they go on the screw in that order. Again, get your good eyes on because these are very tiny pieces. Okay. There's our spring. There's our washer. And there's our gasket. All right. I don't know if we can zoom in on that or not, but that's what you want. So now we obviously can't turn this over to screw it in, so we're going to turn over the carb body and come in from the bottom. So we're just going to come in like this. Screw it, and you just want it to get, you know, just use hand pressure. You don't need to put a screwdriver on here. Just turn it in until it's bottomed out, snug. Once you're there, you're there. You don't have to get, again, don't get after that. All right. So that's that. New parts are in. Okay. So now we're pretty much ready to put this thing back together. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my accelerator pump shaft back in the little hole on the black plastic piece. Grab my bowl. Make sure my little accordion thingy is in position. To get this thing on, the accordion thing goes over that shaft right down the hole. Get it started down the hole. And then it should line up, drop right on. There we go. Got our 4 screws where this all started. And we just zing these down. You know, and again, I think I've said this about 100 times on this. This kind of stuff is not your opportunity to show the world how strong you are. You know, in this case, we're dealing with, these are stainless steel screws going into an aluminum body. So, you know, snug, nice. I kind of turn them down, you know, that way until they're snug, and then just kind of give them just a little snug here. You know, what's that? About a quarter of a turn. Just kind of got to get a feel for this stuff. A lot of guys, you know, and there's nothing wrong with using torque wrenches, but there's going to be lots of times when you aren't going to be able to reach with the torque wrench, and honestly, it'll slow you down like crazy. Some stuff it's critically important, but some stuff it's not. So do develop a feel for this and understand what you're working with, and don't break stuff. That's simple enough. Okay, the bottom of the carb is done. Now we just got to put the slide and all the rest of that back in. This is a little bit of a three-handed operation, but it's not bad. So here's our slide. Somewhere over here, here's our needle. Okay, so there's a little hole in the very bottom of the slide in the center. That's the one you want. Needle goes down in there. Boom. This little cage thing goes over the top of that, bottom's in. Then you got this here, we'll go there in a second, but first things first, let's go ahead and get our slide in the carb. Make sure I'm going the right way. This is directional. It'll only go in one way, which is kind of nice because it's kind of like a lot of this stuff. You take it apart, it's only going back together one way, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Okay, so now you got your spring. This is probably the trickiest part of the whole thing. You got to make sure your gasket, or this, oh, I'm blanking, what do we call this thing? This baffle, whatever, this rubber thing. Just make sure it's nicely in the groove on the carb body. Then we're going to take our lid, make sure the spring goes over that little boss inside the lid, and just go straight down on the spring, hold it in place. Take 3 of the screws, because remember there's that one that holds this bracket thing. We don't want that one yet. We want the other 3. We're going to get them just kind of barely on. Just enough to hold the cap in place so the spring doesn't shoot it off. And you can probably tell there's not a lot of push on that spring. It's not like it's hard to hold it down. So that's that. Now you take this guy here. Again, it kind of hooks over that little nub on the body. There's a hole it lines up with on the body, and then a hole on the top. A couple of screws. And you're in business. Now that everything's in place, I'll go back and snug these all down. Ta-da! Done deal. That's how I do it. If this was helpful, let me know. If you think I screwed it up, tell me why. But there's how you take apart and reassemble a CV carb. We'll talk soon.